Welcome back to the Truth Factory. There have been 4 consecutive weeks of yellow vest protests in France. The protests allegedly started over a fuel tax linked to the Paris Climate Agreement, which I made a video on over a year ago explaining why it was doomed to fail, is a waste of time and resources, and is basically just a wealth redistribution scam that will have a negligible, if any, effect on the environment at all. But left-wing globalist politicians are so disconnected with how the world works, they actually think that by making fuel less affordable, people will just drive less and it will lower carbon emissions and save the world. The green agenda is frequently spouted by rich celebrities, media shills, and dumbasses like Trudeau and Macron, who have absolutely zero regard for how increased fuel taxes and big government green legislation hurts regular working people. They don't live in the same world as us. They hypocritically fly around in their jumbo jets while smelling their own liberal farts all day and donating millions of tax dollars via tweets to virtue signal and impress late-night hosts like Trevor Noah. Thanks, Trudeau. Yet they all seem super surprised to find out that 1. People work for a living and therefore need to drive regardless of the cost of fuel, and 2. People dislike tax increases that go towards paying for bullshit. These are the same globalist shills who were surprised that Trump won. They're surprised that UKIP is popular, and they're surprised that Canadians hate Justin Trudeau and everything that he does. And while they would love to chalk up the rise of right-wing nationalism to just racism, it's honestly just a response to left-wing economic inefficiency and virtue signaling. There's really only so many times that we can hear the liberal slogan, "Diversity is our strength," before we've had enough.
Diversity.
The strength in our diversity.
Our common respect for diversity.
Brought in a more diverse cabinet.
We must also recommit to building a world where diversity and difference are promoted and celebrated.
Remember when the leftist media told you that Trump would ruin America, yet unemployment is at an all-time low and the economy is doing great? Or when they said Matteo Salvini in Italy was a dangerous populist because he didn't want Italy to become Africa and crash the economy? Well, he's also doing great and his country is becoming more stable and on the path to growth. But how's globalist poster child Macron's country doing? It's burning down like a flaming baguette on steroids. And France is just the tip of the iceberg. People all around the world are waking up, and no amount of SJW propaganda about global warming, diversity, or sensitive speech is going to unpiss them off at this point. In fact, German rail workers recently protested wearing yellow vests. Hey Merkel, can you hear me from up there in your ivory tower? Or are you too busy admiring Justin Trudeau's socks and ignoring migrant crime statistics? The protests are also now spreading to other European countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, and now in Canada, where there have been protests against the carbon tax, low oil prices, and the UN Migration Pact. And that's saying something if Canadians are pissed off enough to protest in Alberta in the middle of December. The last thing working people need is a carbon tax. They need a carbon tax like I need feline diabetes. And then there's the UN Migration Pact, or as I like to call it, the Cultural Genocide Pact signed by 150 countries that says that migration is a human right. And because of this pact, in the next couple of years, Canada could see an estimated increase of 1.3 million new immigrants. Keep in mind that Canada's current population is only about 36 million, so that is just insane. Of course, the UN says that its pact is not legally binding, but that's always a type of weasel language they use to sneak in their agenda. There's also worry that this agreement could potentially lead to laws that would thwart freedom of press and even make it illegal to criticize migration, as one of its objectives is to eliminate all forms of discrimination and to promote evidence-based public discourse to shape perceptions of migration. How do you think they're going to accomplish that if not by enacting totalitarian hate speech laws like the ones piling up in the UK? And can anyone tell me how massive third world immigration of people who will mostly live on welfare benefits a nation? Mass immigration massively affects not only the economy, but the country's culture. And that's virtually irreversible, and it feels like we have no say in the matter. With all of that, it's really not surprising that France is on fire, and perhaps that's the appropriate response to the circumstances. The government should be afraid of the people, not the other way around. Even when a loyal dog gets hungry enough, he'll end up biting someone. This is why in America the First and the Second Amendment exist, to protect yourself from a tyrannical government. The elitists have been living in their echo chambers for far too long, and now they're being forced to emerge into the light cast upon them by the torches of the angry mob they're supposed to rule over. These protests are not the result of astroturfing, and this is not some fringe extremist group. This is just a bunch of pissed-off French people in yellow vests who have the support of 75% of the country, which is almost double Macron's current approval rating. The protests have no leader. They're willing to be arrested, tear gassed, lose a hand, and even die for the cause. It's both the left and the right, the young and the old, and they're all protesting together because of Macron's policies. And while Macron is using global warming as an excuse to raise taxes, it seems like the real objective is just a money grab tax scam to fund immigration. The source and the reasons of the taxes isn't really why people are lighting cars and buildings on fire. If it was, the protest would be over by now. It's really because they feel like they have no voice and they want to drain the swamp of these elitist globalists in charge. In Macron's latest speech, he made some very vague promises to buy himself some time, like giving the French an additional 100 euros a month in a minimum wage hike, which really just seems like a bribe to get the yellow vests to stop protesting. He's effectively giving them chicken in their pot every month in exchange for increased taxes and basically communism. He said nothing except that he was going to give more handouts and continue to import infinity immigrants. Now, I'm not an economic genius or anything, but that does not seem like it's going to work out well. Raising minimum wage in Canada has just led to massive layoffs from small businesses, and I don't think it's solved anything. Peace doesn't come to nations because the government demands it. You can't reduce civil strife by neutering the voice and rights of the people. Despite Macron's little too late attempts at negotiating, I predict next week the Yellow Vests will be back in the streets in full force. The best way to have peace is to have a stable economy, low taxes, low unemployment rates, and a government that prioritizes the needs of its people before anyone else. President Trump has been in full support of the Yellow Vests, tweeting, "Very sad day and night in Paris. Maybe it's time to end this ridiculous and extremely expensive Paris Agreement and return money back to the people in the form of lower taxes. The US was way ahead of the curve on that, and the only major country where emissions went down last year." Trump was, of course, one of the few leaders who didn't sign the Paris Agreement and the UN Migration Pact, and while the media heavily criticized him for this based on the upheaval in these countries right now, I think he made the right choice. This is why Trump won and why nationalism is gaining ground worldwide. Countries who have gained a backbone and flipped to a right-wing populist government like Italy, Poland, and Hungary seem to be succeeding. And now people are waking up and they're done buying into this feel-good rhetoric and propaganda of these liberal lunatics. Leaders are going to have to start caring about their own citizens again unless they want a complete political gridlock, work stoppages, and continued protests through the streets. I predict the liberal era is over, and hopefully it's not too late. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, commenting, liking, and supporting me through Patreon or PayPal. And I'd like to give a special shout out to a patron, Austin Zolo. Thank you so much and have a great night. Meow!